easily and for almost no money get your footage from looking like this to this. Let's dive in. Okay, so how do you actually achieve this look of getting your room, your talent, and also the background properly exposed? Well, it all comes down to understanding contrast ratios and ultimately the dynamic range of your camera. Now, modern mirrorless cameras have pretty good dynamic range, usually in the 13 to 14 stops space, but honestly, that's not enough to be able to capture a bright sky and a sort of a darker interior, which is what happens when you typically have lighting outside and you're in a room, which is essentially in the shade. So you're trying to expose for two extremes on that dynamic range spectrum, and that's where you wind up running into the issue. So conventional wisdom is to use window ND gel. You might have heard of ND filters, like you might screw on the front of your camera lens in order to decrease the overall exposure. So window ND film is actually ND film, the same material that you can apply to the windows. It's sort of like a tint. And when you put that window ND gel on the window, it allows you to then decrease the exposure of the window coming through without decreasing exposure in the room directly, like what would happen if you screwed an ND filter onto your lens. So when I first got into filmmaking, I did a bunch of research and I bought all these ND filters, which are great tools to have, but the ND filters won't ultimately help you in a situation like this where you have a blown out window behind you, because when you put an ND filter on your camera, it's going to darken, yes, the window, but it's also going to darken the room to levels where now everything is near black. So the only way to then compensate for that is to get a tremendously powerful LED light that you can shine into your talent to try to recover back that exposure. The problem with that is that when you use really, really bright lights at high intensity, it starts to look very directional and gives your video that artificially lit look, which is maybe what you're going for, but for me, I like everything to look natural and to look motivated by the surrounding environment. So please learn from my mistakes so that you don't have to make them. Right now, I have a very expensive 650 watt light lighting me because I was sort of in this pursuit of being able to expose properly for a window lit background. And by the way, I'll tell you right now, my light is only at 4.6% on my key. So that just goes to show you just how little light output you need to actually expose properly. You can probably get away with like an 80 or 60 watt light, honestly, as a key. So back to the window ND gel conversation. Why would I not just use window ND gel? Well, I found that there's three issues that make window ND not a practical solution for me. Number one is that window ND gel just takes an extremely long time to set up. A lot of times I'm doing run and gun shootings or documentaries or client testimonials and I need to act quickly. You know, people don't have all day to sit around to wait for me to apply window ND gel, so it just takes way too long. The process typically consists of grabbing, Windex, squeegees, and then cutting the window ND gel to shape. Now you can make the process go a little quicker if you install the ND gel to the outside of the window, because you don't have to be as precise with your cuts. But there's been a lot of scenarios where I've been on the second floor of a building and I don't have access to the outside of the window. So that requires me to then have to do it inside. You have to be super precise with your cuts or else it won't look great. So problem number two is that window ND gel is sort of one-time use. Now, once you apply it to the window, you can remove it. So most window ND gel, luckily, doesn't have adhesive on the backside, so it's just kind of clinging to the window through the water pressure and static and a bunch of science that I don't necessarily understand, but it sticks to the window that way. So you can remove it fairly easily. The problem is when you go to store it, if it gets any folds or creases in it, it actually ruins the ND gel, and you can see those folds and creases very visibly when you apply it the next time. So really, it's not a practical solution for long-time storage, let alone the fact that you're cutting it to a custom size for that window. So odds are the next window you need to use the ND gel on, it's not gonna be properly sized. So that sort of creates too big of a challenge for me. And then the last thing is costs. Window ND gel is extremely expensive. You can get a roll of ND gel for like 130 bucks at the cheapest. And that will probably just be good for a handful of windows. It's just really cost prohibitive. And I don't know about you, but you know, if I'm to spend money, I'd rather spend it on film gear, cameras, lighting equipment. I don't want to buy one-time use window ND gel. So because I've always been the type of person who never accepts defeat, I figured there's got to be a better way to do this. So I started a pursuit to find the perfect material that I could use as ND gel replacement. Now this whole process, it took me about a week and a half to figure out. I was placing orders for a bunch of different material types and going through gaff tape like crazy. So here are my results so that you can learn from me and you don't have to spend all of the time, money, and energy that I did. So of course, as any good experiment goes, you started off with a healthy amount of Google searching. So I started there. I looked up some window ND gel alternatives, didn't really find too much, but I will say that I ran across a video that was produced about 2 years ago by a YouTuber named Chungda, I believe. I'll put the video in this description. And in this video, he recommended using mosquito mesh, like you put on your patio screen door. He recommended using that as sort of an ND replacement. So with lack of any real sense of direction from my Google searches, I figured I would start there first. So I ordered the window mesh. Here is that window screen mesh. As you can see, it's typically what you would find on your patio screen door. So we'll start with what I like about it. One, it's very strong. So, you know, if I need to mount this externally, I'm not worried about it breaking or fraying or being damaged. The other thing I like about it is it actually did work decently well. Like you can even see sort of like if I hang this up here, it is lowering the exposure in the background. It just doesn't really give a ton of reduction in light. So I found that really it didn't really provide what I needed. Also, the other thing is that this pattern is, a little too wide. So you can see the shimmering behind you. And especially if the window's like right behind me and the camera's focused on my face and I don't have like a really shallow depth of field, I can see this pattern shimmering and glittering behind me and it's just distracting. So luckily you might think to yourself, okay, well, if it's not reducing the light output enough, why don't you just simply fold it over and use it like 2 layers? And I tried that as well. The problem is that the issue with that shimmering is that it gets worse. You might even be able to pick it up on camera when you layer those layers together. So yeah, so ultimately that was just something that was too distracting. It was creating that visible noise pattern. I think it's called moire, and that was distracting. As a matter of fact, here, I'm gonna bring in a light to demonstrate this. So I'll give you a quick demonstration. Here's the window screen mesh, and you can see before what the exposure is, and after. Before, after. So you can see it does drop the exposure. I'll show you what I mean by doubling it up. What happens, you'll see it does drop the exposure more, but after. Before, after. But you can see that noise pattern starting to show up, and it gets worse. The more you fold, the more light output reduction you get, but the more that noise pattern becomes visible. You can really see it there, right? So, but overall effective. If there was nothing else, this might be a good option. So then I started doing some more research. I actually went back to that original video on YouTube and I saw in the comments someone recommended using what's called chiffon fabric. I didn't even know what it was. I was originally calling it like chiffon fabric because I'm an idiot. So I ordered the chiffon fabric. Now here's the chiffon fabric. As you can see, much tighter weave and it's also much darker, which was a great thing for me because I'm like, oh, that's sweet. When I originally ordered this, I thought it might be too dark and like completely black out the light, but you can see when you put it in front of the light, it actually does a great job bringing down the exposure. And the great thing is that you can see no visible pattern in this stuff. Okay, so this material actually worked really well, really well. I almost stopped here, but the Problem that I noticed is that this material is such a fine weave and it's very delicate. So you can see the edges, they fray very easily, which is not like the end of the world. But if you're using this outside, your mileage will vary as far as the number of times you're able to use it. It also collects a lot of dust and grass and like just sticks and twigs. Like, it's just the nature of this fabric. So it worked well, but it was a little bit too fragile for my liking. So I did a little bit more research and I really didn't find anything else. So I thought the chiffon fabric was just gonna be the thing that I would ultimately settle with, and I would just have to sort of buy, you know, a bunch of it. Which, by the way, I should mention, none of these materials were expensive. Like, all of these I was getting for like $6 for like 5 yards, and 5 yards is enough to do like, you know, probably 3, 4, probably 5-ish windows. So like, very cheap. So even if this was like one-time use where I would have to throw this out because it got all nasty and torn and, you know, and snagged, you know, it's $6 a pop. It's like not bad. But then my sister Javon came over, who is actually a seamstress, and I was talking to her about my dilemma. I was letting her know, like, I got into these like fabrics that I was buying, and I just figured I would ask her if she had any recommendations on a better fabric that would work for what I want. So my sister introduced me to a fabric called Power Mesh. Here's the Power Mesh. Now she starts describing to me the attributes of Power Mesh, which is that is an extremely tight weave, which should give me a decent amount of light reduction. It also is extremely durable. So I'll show you the Power Mesh. I can stretch it. It's very stretchable, which means even if I didn't size it properly, I can actually get a decent amount of stretch, especially the bigger the piece of fabric you have, the more stretch you get. So it's very durable, doesn't snag, tight weave pattern. So I figured that was perfect. So I ordered some Power Mesh and started doing some tests with it. So I'll show you in front of the light, same thing. You can see the reduction in light output. You get a nice reduction in light output before, after. So yeah, that was the process. Those were ultimately the materials that I tried. Power Mesh winded up being the winning combination. But I did mention to you earlier that I figured out a awesome way to mount the Power Mesh to the windows, so that way it's easy, it's fast, but it's also flexible, so that you can reposition the mesh if needed, or even add more layers of mesh with relative ease without having to like redo the entire mount. So I'll show you how I do that. Let's go outside. Okay, so here is the setup. As you can see, I think it looks all right from outside. I mean, it's not like a professional ND gel on the window, but it does get the job done, and it is quite easy to place, move, and add layers, as I'll show you in a second. So after all the trial and error that I did in using gaff tape to try to mount all those materials to the windows, I found that materials, a lot of times they slipped out of the gaff tape. So the gaff tape would still be on the wall, even if it was a brick section, but the actual fabric would slip out. So my criteria for a system that worked well is I want it to be strong, not slip, and I also preferably wanted to use materials that filmmakers might already have in their arsenal. So with all that being said, I started thinking about all the potential materials, Velcro, and I'm like, no, that might snag. And then I came to what I think is an ingenious way to mount it. It's all powered by magnets. These are actually rare earth neodymium magnets, and these are just extremely strong magnets. Word of caution, when you're using these, make sure you don't pinch your fingers in them. I'm not gonna tell you how I know that, but yeah, these are extremely strong. The other thing is, when you're storing these magnets, make sure to use this spacer that it ships with. It actually reduces the strength of the magnets pull on each other, and ultimately makes it a little bit easier to separate them. So, and it also stops them from chipping, because these are pretty fragile. So if you slam the magnets together, they break. Don't ask me how I know that. So ultimately, if you look at the window frame, you'll see there's 4 magnets, 1 for each corner of the window. And that's actually all that's holding that entire fabric onto the window, just 4 of these magnets. So I'll show you how it all mounts in just a second, but essentially go ahead and order yourself a set of these on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. I think it cost me like something like $17 for 24. So I just doubled it up and got, 48 total. and which is like plenty. I mean, this will help. You could do an entire house with these magnets, just with the system that I'm going to show you on how to mount this. But it works really well, and it's modular, so that way you can modify it as needed. And especially as the light changes throughout the day, you can add or take away layers of ND. All right, so you can see my magnet there. This is the lower right corner of the window. And I'm just gonna take this off, and I'll show you how it all mounts onto the window. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take your roll of gaff tape, you're gonna take off, I'm gonna say, I don't know how much that is. So like, that's like 2.5 inches, you know? So take that, you're gonna take your neodymium magnet, and you'll just place it right there in the center, long ways, right? You want to think about the way that the fabric is gonna be pulling, especially if you're gonna be stretching it. So if you're gonna stretch it a lot sideways, you're gonna wanna mount it this way, horizontally. If you're gonna be stretching it a lot vertically, mount it this way. All right, now before you tape this onto the window, what you're gonna do, just for ease of use, is take one corner and fold that down so that it gives you a little tab to lift from. It just makes it easier to remove when you're done. So there you go, you got your corner that you can pull from, and it won't stick down in the window. So essentially what you'll do is you'll find anywhere that's good. I find right on the window frame works the best. And you'll just tape your first magnet to the window frame. Let's try to go between there. Tape it. And like, you know, this system is super modular because you could obviously see this working in a variety of situations. Wherever you have a flat surface that gaff tape will stick to, you can stick your magnet. So now you have that magnet there. I've got my diffusion. This is actually 2 layers of diffusion. You can see I can put a little stretch to bring them to the same length. And then essentially you just take your magnet and install it. Clip the 2 pieces of fabric together. It's literally that simple. If I want to add, you know, or take away a level of ND, I can do that, you know, take that away, and I can just do 1 layer. See, this one's not connected. So there's 1, oh, sun came out, I need to go to 2, boom, right? So it's literally that simple. But, you know, for an entire window from start to finish, 4 minutes, that's way faster than ND gel for really approximately the same level of light reduction and the same look that you get at the end of the day. Maybe somebody will make the argument ND gel is slightly better, but again, as you saw, the footage doesn't lie. But ultimately, I'm really happy with this outcome. So let's just go back inside and we'll wrap things up. All right, so that's my entire process for window darkening on a budget. One thing I did not mention earlier, but I think is super important, is that this whole system is so compact. So I can have all of this fabric just folded down into nice little neat packages, and then these magnets, which are so tiny, I can just put that away in my gear bag. So that way, when I go on site, I have all the tools that I need, and it's lightweight, it's portable, and can get the job done. And I can really use these on some really large windows just to get that darkening effect that I need, which ultimately just gives us a much better end product. So yeah, guys, that's it for today. I wanted to make this super thorough so you could repeat my process. And I just hope that for all the creators out there who have run into this roadblock, you now have a solution that is compact, modular, and allows you to then solve for it and make some really great looking stuff. Looking forward to see what you guys come up with. And hey, look, I'm also interested in if there's any improvements you would make to my system. This is a community, so let's build on top of this together so we can ultimately create something that's even better than what I've come up with. But I think this gives us a good base, and it's something that I did not see out there on YouTube or anywhere on the internet, so I wanted to do my own research and put this together for you. All right, guys, if you like this kind of content, then be sure to follow my channel. I'm a brand new YouTuber, just trying to share cool stuff and make great videos. So yeah, that's it. Until next time, peace.